Hi, welcome to this next presentation. What steps can I take to ensure the rent is paid on time? So one of the big questions that landlords have, perhaps before you become a landlord, how do I know my tenant's going to pay? So this is what concerned landlords can do to ensure their rent is paid on time without the continual chasing and also keeping good relationships with your tenants. So perhaps you have a tenant who's paying late. Perhaps you want to know how to approach the subject of late rent. What systems do you need to ensure that rent is paid on time? And what else can you do to protect yourself against the non-payment of rent? So we'll look at, firstly, tenancy preparation. Then we're going to look at a rent collection process. Then we're going to look at the products that could protect you against non-payment of rent. And then look very briefly at the legal process if your tenant is not paying rent. So I'll guide you through all of these steps, and at the end I will explain how you can achieve all of these things. So rent payment and rent collection really does start with preparation and choosing the right tenant. But just before we go into that, it's reported that less than 10% of tenants go into arrears in any 12-month period. So that's paying 1 or 2 days late, so less than 10%. So it's not a huge problem, but it does happen. So even fewer tenants are in persistent arrears. So it's important to know how to deal with it when your tenant does pay late, which they may do in any given period. So tenant selection, mentioned earlier, that's super important. So you can do a lot of things to protect yourself against late payment of rent. So you can reference your tenant, you can credit search your tenant, you can assess their affordability, you can get references from landlords, etc., previous landlords, and you can meet them at the property. So if you gel with them, create a rapport, get a sense of what type of person they are, all those things will inform your decision of, do I want to work with this person? Will this person be a good, trusted person to take my property on and pay me rent on time? So the next thing, quite an obvious one, is have a tenancy agreement that serves as a document to be very clear about what you expect from your tenants. So it will say the amount of rent, it will say the date it's due. Give your bank details in that tenancy agreement just to be clear about where they can find that information, and propose that they set up a standing order. Sell that as it's very easy for them to manage their rent payments. You don't really want to have to remember to pay your rent. A standing order is an excellent way to ask your tenants to pay that way. The check-in process, so you've now referenced your tenant, you've explained that they need to pay rent on time by a standing order. The check-in process, so when you hand your keys over and maybe do the inventory with them, do set your expectations out really clearly. Communicate with them how to deal with maintenance, and it's also really important that they pay their rent on time. And if there's any issues that they might face in the future, please ask them to get in touch with you first. You don't want them to go quiet on you. You want them to have an open communication with you to say if they are struggling in any shape or form to pay their rent, they need to speak to you first and foremost. It's the most important rent payment they're likely to have in their finances during that month. So communication is key. So the principles of rent collection, any communication process, is to be clear about the tenancy agreement says this, be fair, and understand the person you're talking to, understand the reason they may have paid late. It's important to know that. You don't know everything. There's always two sides to a story, so listen and understand and communicate. So create the good relationships, even if rent is late. Do make sure that you create good relationships with your tenants. Here is an example of perhaps a rent collection process that you might want to implement. So the benefits of a process, you haven't got to think too hard about what your next step is. You just know what your next step is because you've thought about it, you designed your process, and that's what you do. So number one, check the rent is received on a due date. After 3 days, if it hasn't been received, send your first reminder. After 7 days, send your second reminder. 14 days, your final warning. 21 days, perhaps talk about legal notices, and 30 days, perhaps start that process of legal action. Talk to the guarantor. It may be during your referencing process or during your onboarding, you have got a guarantor that's guaranteeing the rent. We normally talk to them at day 14 because that's the point at which they are legally obliged in our guarantor agreement to step in and pay the rent on the tenant's behalf. So that's an example of a process. And once they do pay, they may have just forgotten. So the first text normally, or first call normally, sorts it out. sorry, I forgot, da, 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 da. But do thank them, because you want to create that relationship again. Thank you for your payment. Please can you make sure it's on time next time, etc. So you might not be able to read that, but this is quite a good example of a first reminder. I'm sorry to note that we have not received your payment of £700, £800, whatever the number is, which was due on whatever date it was due on. I hope there's a simple explanation for this, and I would like you to contact me on and give the phone number or email address as soon as possible. If you are currently experiencing financial difficulties, please also contact me. I prefer to work with my tenants, but can only offer to do so if they talk to me. Look forward to hearing from you. So quite a gentle one, quite brief. And here is a second reminder. So after perhaps 7 days, I'm disappointed to note that you have still not received a payment of X amount that was due on a particular date. You've also not contacted me as per my first reminder that was sent on. I hope there's a simple explanation for this, and I would like you to contact me on to explain as soon as possible. As you are now over 14 days late with your rent payment, we are entitled to charge interest on the late payment of rent. At this time of writing, it means that you owe X, and for additional days, it means that you owe an additional X amount of money. If you do not contact me to arrange payment, I may have to consider taking whatever legal steps necessary to regain vacant possession of my property. I very much hope that this action will not be necessary, but it can only be avoided by you paying the outstanding amount and any future rent payments on a regular basis in the future. Look forward to hearing from you within 7 days. So just a couple of examples how you might want to communicate with your tenants. You can charge interest. I think the legislation says at 3% above the Bank of England base rate on any rent or other monies due under agreement that is more than 14 days in arrears. So that's something you can do. In my mind, it's not much of a financial penalty, because if you sort of calculate it, even if a bank base rate is 5, it's 8%. And 8% on a late rent payment from 1 or 2 months isn't that much money, but it is a mechanism that you do have at your disposal. Breathing space. If you are notified by a debt advisor that your tenant has entered into breathing space, then you may not take action to collect or enforce the existing rent arrears until the breathing space ends. So this isn't a video about breathing space, but to let you know that is a framework there that your tenant can enter into a breathing space arrangement. At that point, you can't contact them to chase your rent until that breathing space period ends. So you can protect yourself against non-payment of rent. There are products out there called rent guarantee products. We use Allen Boswell, which is a provider to provide this service. Some of our landlords do take this up, and I think the questions you have to ask yourself is, can I afford not to be without my rent? If the answer is no, a small payment to protect it might give you some comfort that your rent payment is protected. So just the headlines about what that product offers. It covers up to £2,500 rental income per month. It covers up to 15 months rental cover. It covers up to 3 months rental cover following an eviction at 75% of the monthly rent. So imagine your tenant has left. They might not have left it in great condition. You need to refurb it. You still have some 75% of that rent that you would have got during that time. Full landlord legal expenses up to £100,000, including eviction costs, and landlord and expenses helpline, and all types of tenants are considered. So that product is available. Do contact us at any point if you want to get more information on the rent guarantee product. So legal process, there are other videos we have in our series about how to evict tenants in the correct way, but just the headlines here. It would be for late payment or non-payment of rent, it would be Section 8 notice. It is a mandatory ground. There are mandatory grounds and discretionary grounds. If you can demonstrate your tenant has not paid rent for 2 months or more, for example, the judge wouldn't have discretion. They have to give you a possession order on that basis. But also consider using discretionary grounds 10 and 11 as well. So we can talk about that in later videos. Serve notice correctly, really important point, really important to serve notice correctly, because you don't want to get down the line, find out you haven't done it correctly, go back to the start. We'll just prolong the rent the non-payment of rent period. And consider using a letting agent or a professional eviction company. Professional eviction companies do this all day long and they know exactly how to follow the process correctly. So do consider that. It will cost money, but it might be less costly in the future and give you some more certainty as well about that it's all been done correctly. So I hope that was useful. We've talked about tenancy preparation and selection. We've talked about a process of collecting rent if you don't get it. We've talked about the products that might be available to you if you want to protect yourself for non-payment of rent. And we've looked at the legal process for non-paying of rent. So that was useful. So if you have enjoyed today's presentation and you would like my team's help to do this for you, please book a call with me or a member of my team. That link is in the video below. Please look at that and book a call with me. We have spaces to take a few phone call appointments, but if spaces fill up, when they're gone, I'm afraid. On that call, we'll listen to your issues. We'll understand what you would like to achieve and we'll give you our best advice. And if at the end of the phone call it feels like we are a good fit for you and it seems that we can work with you, then we'll move from there. But please book a call and we can have a chat with you. So until next time, thank you for listening. Please do subscribe to this channel, like and comment on the videos and click the links below. There's more information and free content that you can get access to. And here, in the meantime, here is to the success of your property business.